You want to play rough with water rights? Fine. Let's see how your fancy lake front resort looks when it turns into a mud pit. I stood beside the century-old dam valve that managed the lake system feeding Willowbrook Resort, the crown jewel of the HOA president's multi-million-dollar vacation empire. Just 3 hours earlier, they had bulldozed my great-grandfather's barn while I was away at my daughter's cancer treatment, calling it an emergency demolition for community safety. What they didn't realize was that my family built this dam in 1924, and we still hold the original water rights. And now, Karen Whitmore, the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA, had made the biggest mistake of her neatly polished life. She thought she could push around a single father grieving his dad's death. She was about to find out what happens when you corner a man who has nothing left to lose but everything to fight for. The smell hit me first. Diesel fumes and sawdust blended with something that broke me inside. Pulling into the driveway with Emma asleep against the passenger side window, exhausted from chemo, I froze. A massive yellow excavator stood where my great-grandfather's barn had stood for nearly a century. The machine loomed over a pile of shattered timber, wood that had weathered storms since 1924. The sight knocked the breath out of me, left me staggering. That barn wasn't just boards and nails. It was my last physical tie to Dad, who had died in the hospital 6 months ago. Every summer of my childhood, we spent hours inside it. Dad teaching me to work with his tools, telling stories about great-grandpa William, and about the old days when neighbors built for each other. "Daddy, where's great-grandpa's barn?" Emma's whisper cut through me sharper than any blade. I promised her we'd restore the barn once she got better. We dreamed of sanding down the old wood, maybe adding solar panels, turning it into her art studio. Now it was nothing but splinters scattered across the yard like broken promises. Dad's last words echoed in my mind. "That barn holds our family's history, son. Promise me you'll protect it," and I had failed. A construction worker jogged toward me, clipboard in hand, his expression uneasy. "You Marcus Sullivan, sorry about the timing. Here's your paperwork." He shoved a thick manila envelope into my hands and retreated fast, like he expected me to explode. Smart guy, I was close. Emma, too tired to stand, watched me rip it open. Her big eyes weren't just sick, they carried fear. She knew this was bigger than a barn. Emergency demolition notice. Bold red letters screamed from the page. Issued by the Willowbrook HOA, effective immediately. Structural safety concerns and community flood risk. It claimed. Time, stamped 2:47 p.m. My stomach dropped. We'd been at the hospital from 1 to 4:30. The so-called notice even claimed they'd made multiple failed attempts to reach me by mail and in person. Lies. I'd been home every day this week, except today. They waited. They knew. "Daddy, did they take pictures first?" Emma asked quietly, pulling out her phone. Even week, she started documenting, snapping photos of the notice, the timber, the excavator's license plate. My daughter, 12 and fighting cancer, was already thinking like an investigator. She understood. This wasn't just about a building. We were under attack. Marcus, Betty Chen rushed across the street, hair flying, phone clutched like treasure. Betty had lived here longer than anyone. She knew every story, every property line. I took photos, saw that surveyor here last week, with Karen and some slick architect. They measured everything, talked about maximizing lake front access for premium guests. She shoved her phone at me, showing pictures of Karen standing on my property with 2 suited men, one with a tablet, the other with a measuring wheel. They pointed at the barn, then the lake. The timestamp read last Tuesday. So much for an emergency. This had been planned. "Betty, send me those photos." "Do you remember what they said?" My voice was steady, though inside I was shaking. Emma trailed behind me as I knelt by the wreckage. My hands brushed across a timber beam, old marks etched by tools nearly a century ago. There, carved into the wood, W.S. 1924, William Sullivan, my great-grandfather, who built this barn by hand during the Roaring Twenties. "Daddy, why would they do this?" Emma leaned against me, her bald head warm on my shoulder. Chemo had taken her hair, but not her fire. Grandpa would be mad, wouldn't he? He built this for us, and they just threw it away. Her voice was soft, but determined. I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I'll find out. Something shifted inside me, grief hardened into purpose. Karen thought she'd broken me, but she'd just given me a reason to fight. 4 generations of Sullivans had protected this land. I wasn't going to be the one to fail. I pulled out my phone and began my own documentation. Photos of the wreckage, the notice, the machine. If Karen wanted to play with paperwork and lies, she was about to learn two could play that game. That's when Tank Rodriguez, my neighbor 3 houses down, walked over. A Marine veteran, tough as nails. He studied the wreckage. Brother, this ain't right. That's old growth timber. You don't bring in equipment like that for emergencies. You do it when you want to send a message. He knelt, picking up a beam. See this? They didn't just knock it down, they pulverized it. Wanted to make sure you couldn't rebuild. This was deliberate. Betty gripped my arm. There's more. Yesterday, I overheard Karen on the phone. She said something about Phase 2 expansion and needing to secure the Sullivan property in 90 days before summer season. She didn't know I was nearby, but I heard it all. Phase 2. So this wasn't just about my barn. She wanted everything, my land, my home, and she wasn't going to stop. I looked at my neighbors, some horrified, some hiding back inside, too afraid to get involved. This was more than property lines or HOA rules. It was about whether we stood up or let greed tear us apart. Daddy, what's that? Emma pointed at something buried under rubble. I pulled out a dented metal lockbox. The barn's old tool cabinet had hidden it, and somehow it survived. Inside were yellowed photos and documents. My great-grandfather beside the new barn, shaking hands with men in suits, construction images of a water system, and at the bottom, an official paper stamped with county seals. I glanced again at the demolition notice. Compliance required within 30 days. Estimated cost $75,000. Failure meant more penalties, $75,000, more than I'd earned in 6 months, drowning in medical bills. Karen knew she wanted to crush me financially, but as I studied the old documents, I realized she might have overlooked something. She was so busy tearing the barn down, she didn't notice what was hidden inside it. Come on, Em, let's go inside. I held her cold hand, guiding her back to the house. She was weakening. Dr. Hernandez had warned us the next few months would be critical. A war with the HOA was the last thing we needed. But it looked like that's exactly what we were getting. I wrapped Emma in a blanket on the couch, her iPad glowing softly, while my mind burned with one thought. Karen had started a battle she wouldn't be able to finish. I stood at the window, staring at the wreckage of my great-grandfather's barn. The demolition crew was loading up, their job done, probably eager to head home to their families. The excavator operator glanced back at me once, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret in his eyes. He was just following orders, but he had destroyed something priceless. That barn had survived the Great Depression, World War II, the moon landing, 9/11, every storm of the past century, but it couldn't survive Karen Whitmore's greed. As I spread those old documents across my kitchen table, something struck me. My great-grandfather had been a lot sharper than Karen ever imagined. William Sullivan didn't just build things to last. He planned ahead, and maybe, just maybe, he'd left protections in place that no power-hungry HOA president could erase. The basement smelled like Dad's pipe smoke and secrets. I hadn't set foot down there since the funeral, but Betty's words kept echoing in my mind. Old-timers were smart. Dad had been meticulous, always keeping records of everything. If there was something Karen overlooked about this property, it would be here, buried in boxes holding 4 generations of Sullivan history. I started with the basics: deeds, tax receipts, insurance papers. The usual stuff that showed steady ownership. Then I found something more. A heavy metal box tucked behind a stack of my old college books. The lock was rusty but intact. I remembered Dad showing it to me when I was Emma's age, saying it held important family documents I'd need someday. The key was right where he'd said it would be, taped under his workbench. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth like buried treasure, were papers that made my hands tremble. First, a hand-drawn map of the entire water system, dated 1924, showing every pipe and valve connecting the lake to nearby properties. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, W. Sullivan, Chief Water Engineer, Willowbrook County Water Trust. The second document was even bigger, a contract between William Sullivan and the county, granting our family perpetual water rights and emergency authority over the entire lake system, signed by the county commissioner, the state water board, and witnessed by 3 prominent locals. The language was formal, old-fashioned, but the meaning was clear as day. My family had legal control over the water that powered Karen's precious resort. Holy hell, I muttered, then instantly felt guilty for swearing in Dad's basement. But this was massive. Karen thought she ran everything through the HOA, but she'd been playing with half a deck. My great-grandfather hadn't just owned land. He'd designed and built the lake system itself. Without him, Karen's resort wouldn't even exist. Then I found a third paper that made me smile for the first time in days. A 1925 letter from the county commissioner, thanking William Sullivan for his service and confirming that all water rights and responsibilities would pass to his heirs forever. It even referenced the emergency valve on our property, calling it essential for flood control and community safety. Daddy, Emma's small voice came from the stairs. She looked pale, her schedule thrown off by medication, but she was awake. I showed her the papers and explained what they meant. Her eyes lit up. So, great-grandpa was like the boss of the whole lake? She asked. Her voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. Does that mean we can tell Karen she can't have our land? Straight to the point. Kids always saw the truth faster. It means we have options, sweetheart. I told her, but first I need to have a word with our dear HOA president. The next evening, I walked into the community center with a folder under my arm and Emma holding my hand. I'd asked Tank to sit with her, but she insisted on coming. I want to see you tell Karen about great-grandpa, she said. After everything she'd endured, how could I say no? Karen sat at the front like a corporate queen, 2 board members beside her looking uneasy. Around 30 neighbors filled the folding chairs, most of them skeptical. Karen had called this emergency meeting, but I could already see doubt in the crowd. I stood, Emma's hand squeezing mine. Thank you, Karen, for that creative presentation. I especially like the part where you called my great-grandfather's barn an unauthorized structure. Interesting choice of words, because according to these documents, William Sullivan built that barn in 1924 as part of his work as chief water engineer for the Willowbrook County Water Trust. The room went silent. Karen's smile faltered. Would you care to explain? I continued, why you demolished a structure that wasn't only legal, but part of the original water system that created the very lake your resort profits from? I opened the folder and held up copies of the documents. Karen flushed red. Those are probably fakes, she snapped. Old papers can be forged. Betty, I called. Betty Chen rose, phone in hand. I have photos of Karen with surveyors and architects on Marcus's property last week, long before any so-called emergency demolition. Here, the next morning, I learned how to use Facebook Live. Emma helped set up the camera, making sure the rubble was visible behind me. She even insisted on makeup to hide the chemo's toll. Gotta look strong for Daddy's movie. She grinned. God, I loved that kid. All right, folks, let's talk about water rights and what happens when HOA presidents think they're above the law. I held the 1924 documents up to the camera. My name is Marcus Sullivan. 3 days ago, the Willowbrook HOA demolished my great-grandfather's barn while I was at my daughter's cancer treatment. They called it an emergency, but here's what they didn't tell you. Viewers poured in. Tank shared the link, then Betty, Rick, and half the neighborhood. The comments lit up with anger and support. People loved an underdog story. Add in a sick child and a demolished barn. It was wildfire. My great-grandfather William Sullivan was the chief engineer who built this entire water system. He secured perpetual water rights, passed down to his heirs. That's me. That's my daughter Emma. Emma waved to the camera, her smile melting hearts. The comments exploded with love. Then I dropped the bomb. You might wonder why the HOA would risk tearing down a historic barn. Let me read something. I pulled out Rick's flash drive, printed emails in hand. Karen Whitmore to Investor Group, Phase 2 expansion requires lake front access. The Sullivan property is the key. Barn demolition scheduled Thursday during his daughter's treatment. Emergency clause gives us cover. The viewer count spiked past 10,000. The comments came faster than I could read. Outrage everywhere. Karen had made a fatal error, attacking a widowed father and his sick child. In the court of public opinion, that was unforgivable. So here's what I'm going to do. I walked toward the lake, camera following. Those water rights my family secured. They give me legal control over the lake system, including the water supply to Willowbrook Resort. The camera panned to the Shining Resort across the water. Beautiful place, runs entirely on what my great-grandfather built. I'm not going to do anything illegal. I'm not going to destroy anything, but I am going to use my authority, and Karen Whitmore is about to learn. Actions have consequences. The stream ended with Emma at my side, both of us standing against the backdrop of ruins, destruction behind us, determination ahead. Within 12 hours, the video hit 15,000 views and nearly 900 shares. Local groups were ablaze with debates about HOA abuse and water rights. Karen's response came fast. A certified letter from Hartwell and Hartwell Associates, threatening lawsuits for defamation, privacy violations, and inciting unrest. The letter demanded that I delete the video and issue a public apology. It also included a formal complaint she'd filed with the county, accusing me of making unauthorized changes to the water system, even though I hadn't touched a single thing yet. That afternoon, I decided to test the waters, quite literally. Emma walked beside me, her iPad in hand, recording everything. The main valve was right where the 1924 map said it would be, tucked behind a small maintenance shed most folks probably assumed belonged to the county. At 6:00 a.m., the following Tuesday, a black SUV appeared in front of my house, a grim sign of how desperate Karen was becoming. Professional security, tinted windows, and a man who looked like he bench-pressed cars for a warm-up. By noon, new cameras had been mounted on the utility poles, all pointed at my home, backyard, and the path leading to the lake. Emma peeked through the curtains. "Daddy, why is that man just sitting there?" "Because Karen thinks she can scare us into giving up." I explained, trying to keep my anger from spilling over. "But she's about to learn that Sullivans don't scare easily." The cameras were just the beginning. By Thursday, every house in the neighborhood received a glossy, professionally printed pamphlet titled Marcus Sullivan, a community threat. 8 pages of propaganda, painting me as some kind of radical. The cover had a photo of me from my Facebook Live, edited to look menacing, with bold red text screaming "Water Terrorist." Tank showed up at my door with a copy, shaking his head. "Brother, this is psychological warfare. She paid top dollar for this." Inside the pamphlet were fake testimonials from concerned citizens, cherry-picked quotes from supposed engineers about flood risks, and a timeline of my so-called escalating behavior. It was filled with carefully dressed-up lies. Worst of all, it mentioned Emma's illness, claiming that stress from her treatment made me unstable and dangerous. It even included fabricated quotes from neighbors, people I'd never even spoken to, claiming they feared for their safety. The smear campaign worked quickly. That very night, Emma called her best friend Zoe, only to have Zoe's mom answer instead. Her voice was flat, cold. "I'm sorry, Emma, but Zoe won't be coming over anymore. Your father's behavior is concerning." Emma hung up and looked at me, tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Peterson says I can't play with Zoe anymore. Because you're dangerous, am I not allowed to have friends now?" That was the moment Karen crossed a line she could never uncross. She hadn't just gone after my land. She had taken aim at my daughter's friendships, her 12-year-old heart, while she was already fighting for her life. Something inside me snapped. A cold, steady fury rose up. I crouched down and looked Emma in the eye. "Listen, sweetheart. Some people are afraid of the truth. They'd rather stay quiet than stand for what's right. Mrs. Peterson isn't a bad person. She's just scared. But we're not going to let fear decide what's right and wrong." Later that afternoon, I stumbled onto Karen's newest scheme, a 47-page legal petition to the county requesting eminent domain seizure of my property. It was slick, polished, complete with staged photographs, fake engineering reports, and phony community testimonials. According to her petition, my land was essential for public safety upgrades. The upgrades she claimed would cost $2.3 million, funded by emergency assessments conveniently exempting her resort, but the cruelest part was how she twisted Emma into it. The petition included a section about ensuring safe evacuation for vulnerable families with medical needs, using Emma's cancer treatment as justification for stealing our home. That evening, Tank pulled up beside my truck. Behind him were Betty, Rick, and nearly a dozen other neighbors I never thought would risk showing up. Tank spoke for them all. "Marcus, this pamphlet is garbage, and we all know it. Karen's gone too far." Betty stepped forward, a folder in her hands. "I've been digging. Karen's resort reports losses to the IRS every year, but her social media is full of expensive upgrades and constant bookings. I think she's committing tax fraud," Rick chimed in. "And she's been buying a ton of gear, cameras, printing equipment, always paying in cash. She's been asking around about water shut-off valves too. She's planning something." Then at 3:17 a.m., the phone jolted me awake. It was Dr. Hernandez. His calm, professional tone couldn't mask the urgency. "Marcus, you need to bring Emma to the hospital immediately. Her blood work shows concerning changes." Emma was already sitting up, pale but calm, with that eerie awareness sick kids develop. "Is it time, Daddy?" she asked softly, and I knew she understood. We had talked about this moment, the day when her body would say it couldn't keep fighting. That day had arrived. The next 6 hours blurred into medical briefings, hushed conversations, and impossible decisions. Emma's white blood cell count had crashed. Her body was losing the fight against leukemia. The bone marrow transplant could no longer wait. The procedure will cost roughly $500,000. Dr. Hernandez explained gently. "With insurance approval, your out-of-pocket portion should be about $50,000 without approval." He didn't need to finish. Without approval, Emma would die, and I would drown in debt trying to save her. I called the insurance company from Emma's hospital room, listening to her breathe as she slept. After an hour of transfers, I finally reached the supervisor, Linda Morrison. Her voice was brisk, detached, utterly indifferent. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, "your daughter's case is still under extended review. There are questions about your family's financial stability and community support systems." That last phrase hit me like a physical punch. Community support systems, Karen had gotten to them. Karen somehow managed to wedge herself into my daughter's medical crisis. That very afternoon, she appeared at the hospital, holding flowers and wearing a mask of false concern, dressed like the picture-perfect caring neighbor. "Marcus, I just heard about Emma's condition. I'm so terribly sorry. I know we've had our disagreements, but in times like this, the community needs to pull together." The audacity of it nearly left me speechless. "I want to help," she went on, easing herself into a chair she hadn't been invited to take. "I've spoken with Linda Morrison at Blue Cross. We were friends back in college, and she's worried about Emma's case. Insurance approvals can get complicated when there are questions about family stability, but I have a solution." She leaned in, her voice calm, calculated. "I'll personally see to it Emma gets the best treatment possible. Linda can push the approval through, no delays, but we need to settle our community issues first. I'll offer you $750,000 for your property, well above fair market. That money will show financial stability. Your insurance will clear immediately, and all this unpleasantness between us will be behind us." I stared at her, then at my daughter lying in the hospital bed. "You're holding my child's medical care hostage to steal my land." Karen didn't even flinch. "I'm offering you a way out, Marcus. Solve your money problems, get your daughter's treatment, and move on. But the transplant window won't stay open forever. The choice is yours." When she left, Emma clutched my hand. "Daddy, she's not helping me, is she?" "No, sweetheart, she's using you." "I heard her in the hallway," Emma whispered. "She told someone about pressure points and an inevitable conclusion. I think she's trying to hurt us." That evening, Tank showed up with Jennifer Hayes, both looking grim. Jennifer spread papers across the hospital's tiny visitor table. "Marcus, we found the missing link," she said. "Karen's resort company donated $50,000 to Blue Cross's Community Health Fund the same week Emma's claim got flagged, and the donation was earmarked specifically for helping families in need within the coverage area. It's a bribe, plain and simple." The evidence was damning. Karen hadn't just bent the rules, she'd built an entire scheme around breaking them. I looked over at Emma. She was pretending to be asleep, but I knew she was listening. Her small voice broke the silence. "Daddy, what would great-great-grandpa do?" I thought of William Sullivan, who had poured his own money into building waterworks that served neighbors for generations. He'd protect his family first, I said softly. But he'd also protect the community. He'd make sure bullies couldn't twist power into a weapon. Emma nodded, then surprised me. She reached for Jennifer's phone. "Can I record something? I want people to know what Karen's doing to us." That night, I couldn't close my eyes. Emma's words repeated in my head. "She's using my sickness to steal our home." Karen had crossed her final line. She wasn't just attacking my land anymore. She was turning my daughter's fight for survival into a property deal. I sat by Emma's bed, watching the tubes and monitors that cocooned her in a fragile bubble of life, and something cold and immovable settled in my chest. No more half measures. If Karen wanted a war over water, then she was about to learn exactly why no one threatens a Sullivan's family. The walk to the old valve felt almost sacred. My flashlight cut a path through the night, across the same trail my great-grandfather had walked nearly a century earlier when he built the system to serve our community. The valve was exactly where his hand-drawn map had marked it, buried in wild overgrowth that hadn't been trimmed in decades. It looked like a relic from an industrial museum, a massive iron wheel connected to tarnished brass fittings, their metal long since turned green with age. This was the heart of it all, the one control point feeding water to every home along the lake, including Karen's precious resort. My palms pressed against the cold iron, every scratch and dent carrying the weight of a century. William Sullivan had designed this valve to be operated by hand, believing that critical choices about water and community should never be left to machines. They should demand human judgment, human responsibility. The wheel resisted at first, locked in place by rust and decades of stillness, as though unwilling to be disturbed after such long, faithful service. But persistence is in a Sullivan's blood. I leaned in with my full weight, forcing it to budge. Bit by bit, the ancient grime cracked, the corrosion surrendered, and the wheel began to turn. The groan of old metal filled the night until at last, it moved with a grudging rhythm, as if remembering what it had been built for. This wasn't just about water anymore. Every turn was about something greater: family, dignity, and a little girl's right to live. I thought of Emma in her hospital bed while Karen bartered her life like a bargaining chip. I thought of my great-grandfather who had built this system to serve his neighbors, and of Karen Whitmore who wanted to twist it for her own empire. Each rotation of that wheel felt like striking a blow for justice, like setting right a scale that had been tipped for far too long in favor of greed and corruption. When the valve finally locked shut with a sharp, echoing click, it sounded like a gavel slamming down in judgment. Silence spread across the night. No water was flowing anymore, not to Karen's resort, not to her empire. I stood in the darkness, breath ragged, the weight of family history heavy on my shoulders. William Sullivan had built this system to protect his community. Tonight, I was using it to protect my family and to remind the world that greed carries consequences. By sunrise, Karen's kingdom looked like a wasteland painted in browns and grays. The resort's infinity pool had sunk 4 feet overnight, revealing slimy algae, streaked concrete that looked more like a swamp than luxury. The perfect lawns browned under the morning sun, while the sprinklers clicked pointlessly, hissing air instead of water, like mechanical death rattles. The golf course resembled a cratered wasteland. Ponds had shriveled into cracked mud pits where imported koi flailed helplessly in shrinking puddles. Guests were fleeing in droves, dragging suitcases across what had been paradise only hours earlier. At 6:15 a.m., the phone rang. Karen's voice shrieked through the line, equal parts fury and panic. "You maniac, you're ruining people's vacations. I'll have you arrested for sabotage. You tried to destroy my daughter's chance at life," I said evenly, watching sunlight turn the dry lakebed into a golden stage of justice. "Now you know what it feels like when someone controls the thing you need most." The resort she had used as a weapon against us was now nothing but mud, just as I had warned her weeks earlier. "Turn it back on immediately or you'll what, Karen? Call your friend at the insurance company." I cut her off. "Your reign is finished." I hung up and drove back to the hospital with something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Not just for Emma's fight against cancer, but for our town, for the chance that people like Karen could finally be stopped. Tomorrow, I would face the county commissioners with every shred of evidence we had. Karen had gambled that my grief would make me weak. She was about to discover that when you've got nothing left to lose, you find out just how strong you really are. The commissioner's chamber was filled beyond capacity. Word of Emma's video had spread across social media, sparking outrage. Jennifer's live stream already had more than 8,000 viewers before the meeting began. Emma sat beside me in her wheelchair, dressed in her favorite purple outfit, a baseball cap on her head that read Team Sullivan. Tank's old Marine buddies had driven 3 hours to deliver it. Despite her frailty, Emma had insisted on coming. Great, great. Grandpa would want me here, she'd said. Karen arrived with an entourage fit for a courtroom drama: 3 attorneys, 2 investors in sharp suits, and a woman glued to her phone, likely a PR consultant. Karen herself wore a polished business suit, posing as the responsible leader. Commissioner Bradley's gavel struck. We are here to address issues concerning water rights and HOA governance in the Willowbrook area. Mr. Sullivan, you requested this hearing. Please begin. I rose, folder in hand. Commissioners, my name is Marcus Sullivan. 5 weeks ago, while I was with my daughter at her cancer treatment, the Willowbrook HOA demolished my family's barn. They claimed it was an emergency, but what I have here proves the truth. It was planned months in advance as part of a coordinated attempt to drive us off our land. I laid out the timeline: Karen's hidden property surveys, the false emergency demolition notice, the impossible financial penalties. Then I showed them the original 1924 water rights deed, the county contract granting my family a permanent easement, and documents outlining Karen's secret Phase 2 expansion plans. I shifted to the medical side. Commissioners, my daughter Emma requires a bone marrow transplant. Our insurance company has delayed approval for this life-saving procedure. I have proof that Karen Whitmore contacted insurance executives to question our stability as a family, directly impacting Emma's care. The chamber erupted with outrage. Voices shouted, "That's sick," and she used a child's cancer. I played Emma's recorded message. Her small but steady voice filled the room. My name is Emma Sullivan. I have leukemia, and I need a bone marrow transplant to survive. Mrs. Whitmore is making my daddy choose between saving me and saving our home. She's using my sickness to take our land. That isn't fair, and it isn't right. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by muffled sobs. Commissioners and audience members alike wiped their eyes. Karen's face drained of color, her carefully crafted mask crumbling in front of everyone. I pressed forward. Furthermore, I've uncovered evidence that Mrs. Whitmore has been violating federal water management laws. Her resort has been drawing beyond permitted limits and making unauthorized alterations to the intake system that supplies her property. I laid out the EPA inspection files Jennifer had secured through Freedom of Information Act requests. These documents proved the violations had been happening for years, causing environmental harm and opening the door to possible federal charges. Commissioner Martinez leaned forward. Ms. Whitmore, would you like to respond to these accusations? Karen rose, her polished mask finally slipping. Commissioners, Mr. Sullivan is unstable because of his family troubles. He's been tampering with our community's water supply and making reckless changes to vital infrastructure. I've only been trying to protect the neighborhood from his unstable behavior. Unstable behavior. I countered, holding up my phone. Commissioners, I'd like to share a few recordings. These are legal under our state's single-party consent law. The first played loud and clear, Karen's voice. Marcus needs to realize that community cooperation impacts everything: property values, insurance approvals, even medical priorities. Families that support the HOA get better treatment during emergencies. The second was worse. Linda, it's Karen. About the Sullivan insurance claim, their family's stability is questionable. They've resisted neighborhood projects, and there are concerns about their reliability. A drawn-out review might convince them to cooperate. The room exploded. Commissioners were shouting, the audience rose to their feet, and Karen's attorneys whispered frantically, Karen herself snapped, her voice echoing off the walls. I was protecting this community. After I lost my son, this place became everything to me. I won't let Marcus Sullivan ruin what I've built. Then she uttered the words that destroyed her. If Marcus thinks he can use his sick daughter to manipulate this community, he's wrong. I've worked too hard to let one grieving father undo it all. The room went silent. Even her lawyers stared in disbelief. Emma squeezed my hand tightly. Commissioner Bradley's voice was like ice. MS Whitmore, did you just admit to using a child's illness as leverage in a property battle? Karen realized too late what she'd said. The whole exchange was streaming live on Jennifer's feed to more than 12,000 people. From there, everything unraveled quickly. Within 2 days, the FBI launched a federal probe into her water rights violations and corruption. The state attorney general opened a tax fraud case. The county stripped her of HOA leadership and placed the board under supervision. But the best news came unexpectedly. Linda Morrison from Blue Cross called me herself. Emma's transplant had been pushed to top priority and would be fully covered. The company wanted nothing to do with the stink of medical extortion. Emma's surgery was scheduled for Monday. Dr. Hernandez explained that I was a perfect genetic match to be her donor. Emma just smiled and said, "Great, great. Grandpa's still looking out for us, isn't he?" Karen's empire collapsed overnight. The EPA fines alone forced her to sell assets. Tax probe uncovered 3 years of hidden income, leading to criminal charges and property seizures. Investors abandoned her after the viral video shredded her reputation. Within 2 weeks, she lost everything: her business, her homes, her wealth, her freedom. She pled guilty to federal corruption and got 3 years in prison. Meanwhile, Emma's transplant was flawless. Within weeks, her blood counts returned to normal. Her hair grew back, curly and red like her mother's. She painted watercolors of the lake, saying she wanted to remember why her great-great-grandfather built it. The county voted to honor William Sullivan's original will, converting the lake system into a public trust managed by elected residents. I was chosen as the first trustee, carrying forward my family's legacy. The day Emma came home, the whole neighborhood gathered in our yard. Tank hosted a welcome home barbecue that turned into a community celebration. 6 months later, we opened the William Sullivan Community Center on the very spot where Karen had bulldozed the barn. Inside were historical displays, meeting halls, children's programs, and emergency facilities. Emma designed a memorial garden, its centerpiece a bronze plaque engraved with her words, "Water belongs to everyone. Communities are built by those who care more about tomorrow than today." Standing beside me, healthy and smiling, Emma held up a new painting of the lake at sunrise with the community center in the background. At the bottom she had written, "Some things are worth fighting for." "Ready for the next adventure, Dad?" she asked. I looked at her, the lake, and the neighbors who had become family. Justice had prevailed. William Sullivan built this system for the people. Karen tried to steal it for greed. In the end, the water kept flowing for everyone. So if this story touched you, if you believe in standing up to bullies and fighting for what matters, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and share this with anyone who believes justice should flow as freely as water. Because there are more stories out there, ordinary people pushed to the edge, who discover they're stronger than they ever imagined. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.